Welcome to Unit 9, Topic 2, Reagan and Conservatism. The goal of this video is for us to help you understand the causes and effects of policy debates surrounding the federal government's role in the 1980s. This includes the effects of the debates and policies themselves. So let's not waste any time and get into it, shall we? Pre-Reagan times and the rebirth of the conservative movement and setting the stage. The rebirth of the movement took place in 1964 in the presidential election where candidate Barry Goldwater ran as a Republican against then President Democrat Lyndon B. Johnson. His platform was conservative and promoted the rebirth of the movement, thus the conservative movement had been dusted off and given a name. Moving forward to today's topic, date, we need to bring up former President Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter served as the 39th president from 1977 to 1981. What you mainly need to know about Carter is that during his presidency, under his watch, the Iranian hostage situation took place and stagnation ensued. For certain and multiple reasons, relations between Iran and the US were deteriorating. The once ally of the United States was now calling for the end of America's influence in the Middle East. This led to Iranian nationals trespassing the American embassy in Iran and holding captive multiple American citizens. The slow response and secrecy of how the government was handling this situation led to a lot of Americans seeing Jimmy Carter as weak in the global stage, and his popularity dropped significantly. Additionally, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, imposed an oil embargo, basically a ban on trading in 1973, which caused oil prices to rise significantly. This led to a sharp increase in energy and production costs for businesses. Jimmy Carter's leadership style was perceived as indecisive, ineffective by many Americans, and his administration was often seen as disorganized. Public opinion on him had considerably declined, like already stated, and people were frustrated with him as a president. All of this, along with other events such as the liberal movements of the 1960s and 70s, namely the women's and gays liberation movements, caused many conservatives to grow restless and demand change. Coincidentally, this will set the stage for Ronald Reagan's big campaign. First, let's briefly discuss Ronald Reagan himself. He was a well-known actor and television actor who gained fame among Republicans as an effective political speaker in the 1964 Goldwater campaign. He was soon elected as governor of California shortly after, which is the nation's most populous state. And by 1976, Reagan was the party's leading spokesperson for conservative positions. He proved to be a master of the media and was seen by millions as a likable and sensible champion of average Americans. On a side note, he was the person who came up with the phrase, "Make America Great Again," which is still widely used by Republican candidates in the modern day.
Moving on to Reagan's campaign. He ran as a mainstream conservative whose goal was to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. Reagan pledged that his administration would lower taxes, reduce government spending on welfare, build up U.S. armed forces, and create a more conservative federal court. Reagan attacked the Democrats for expanding government and for undermining U.S. prestige abroad. Reagan also pointed to a misery index of 22, which is the rate of inflation added to the rate of unemployment. The voters' rejection of Carter's presidency and the growing conservative move gave Reagan 51% of the popular vote and almost 91% of the electoral vote. Moving on to what made Ronald Reagan stand out, his policies and views. During his presidency from 1981 to 1989, Reagan advocated for a limited government, free market capitalism, and less government spending. He promoted tax cuts, deregulation, and privatization, and sought to reduce the size and scope of the federal government. First, the deregulation on industries. Following up on the promise of getting government off the backs of the people, the Reagan administration reduced federal regulations on business and industry. Restrictions were eased on saving and loan institutions, mergers and takeovers by large corporations, and environmental protection. To help the struggling American auto industry, regulations on emission and auto safety were also loosened. Secretary of the Interior James Watt opened federal lands for increased coal and timber production and offshore waters for oil drilling. This was effectively rolling back all of the pro-environment policies during the previous decades, so these were huge shifts in policies. Next, Reagan's policies on welfare programs were focused on reducing government dependency and promoting self-sufficiency. He advocated for a workfare approach to welfare, which required able-bodied recipients to work in exchange for benefits. He also supported cuts to funding for social programs like food stamps and Medicaid, arguing that they were a drain on the federal budget. This saved about $40 million. However, Reagan was also a strong supporter of the military, and he believed in maintaining a strong national defense. He increased defense spending significantly during his presidency, with the goal of improving the country's military capabilities and deterring potential adversaries. He also pursued a policy of peace through strength, believing that a strong military would help to prevent conflict and protect American interests around the world. Unfortunately, this racked up around $150 billion in military spending. Huh, interesting. Moving on.
And supply side economics. Reagan believed tax cuts and reduced government spending would increase investment by the private sector, leading to increased production, jobs, and prosperity. Critics of the supply side theory compared to the trickle-down economics of the 1920s, in which wealthy Americans prospered so the increased spending benefited the middle class and the poor, meaning the trickle-down system worked. However, with economics, did not happen. Let me explain. Soon after Congress passed the Economic Recovery of 1981, which included a 25% decrease in personal income taxes over 3 years, cuts in the corporate income tax, capital gain tax, and gift and inheritance taxes, guaranteed that a large share of the tax relief went to upper income taxpayers. And that I know that that's a lot of big words, but what all of this means that the already wealthy were benefiting more from these policies, while the middle and working class did not. All of this is confirmed with the recession and consequent recovery of 1982 and 1983. In 1982, the nation suffered one of the worst recessions since the 1930s. Banks failed and unemployment reached 11%. However, the recession, along with falling oil prices, reduced the double the inflation rate of the 1970s to less than 4%. With lower inflation, tax costs, and ballooning federal deficits, the economy rebounded at the start of 1983. However, the recovery only widened the income gap between rich and poor, while upper income groups enjoyed higher incomes from lower taxes and a deregulated marketplace. The standard of living of the middle class remained stagnant or declined. Something that is interesting to note is the election of 1984. The return to prosperity restored public confidence in the Reagan administration. And at the Republican convention of 1984, Republicans nominated their popular president by acclamation. Two-thirds of white males voted for Reagan. Only two groups of voters favored the Democrats: African Americans and people earning less than $12,500 a year. This again reaffirms that not everybody benefited from the policies set by Ronald Reagan. Reagan also aligned himself with social conservative and traditional values, opposing abortion and same-sex marriage. And he greatly advocated for a return to family values and religious principles. The Moral Majority was a Christian organization that supported the Republican Party and the conservative movement. He had a significant role in moving conservative Christians to support the Republican Party, especially benefiting them at the time and then candidate to be the 40th President Ronald Reagan. They were also pushing for more conservative judges on the Supreme Court. President Reagan followed through on his pledge to appoint conservative judges to the Supreme Court. His nominations included Sarah Day O'Connor, the first woman on the court, as well as Antonin Scalia and Anthony Kennedy. Led by a new Chief Justice, William Rehnquist, the Supreme Court shifted to the right, and it scaled back affirmative action on hiring, promotions, and limited Roe v. Wade by allowing states to impose great restrictions on abortion, such as requiring minors to notify their parents before having one. This followed New Wave conservatism and Reagan and the New Right set traditional ideas. And there you go. As you hopefully know now, Ronald Reagan had a huge impact not only on the entirety of society, but the United States economy and politics as a whole, with appealing new policies and by reaffirming reintroduced ideals. It's important to know that his presidency continued to impact America later down the road as well. But the main focus here is the impacts through the 1980s in the country. And with that being said, thank you for the time and attention. And go and ace that AP exam.